Hi, how are you? I hope you are doing well. I am the Amateur Logician from amateurlogician.com. We're going to consider in brief conditional proofs. Let's consider the general structure or outline of a conditional proof. So we have some argument. We, of course, start out with some premises. And here we have p sub 1, p sub 2, and so on and so forth down to p sub n. We have some premises. We then make an assumption. And we'll just call that assumption A. It's the proposition A. And then through our standard rules of inference, like modus ponens, modus tollens, disjunctive syllogism, and so on and so forth, and with that assumption, we derive new things. So we make some derivations, and we'll just say we get the proposition d sub 1, d sub 2, and so on and so forth down to d sub n. D sub n is based on inferences made with our premises and our assumption. So if we assume our assumption, we ultimately will validly get d sub n, but it's just an assumption. So our conclusion is simply that if A, then d sub n. We assume A, we get d sub n. So if A is the case, then d sub n is the case based on our premises and the derivation we got based on that assumption. So it's pretty straightforward. Here's an example. Okay, so this example is from the Supson Hill textbook, page 135. So we have either the witness is not telling the truth, or Brown was home by 11. If Brown was home by 11, then he saw his uncle. If he saw his uncle, then he knows who was there earlier. Thus, conclusion, if the witness is telling the truth, then Brown knows who was there earlier. So we're going to do a conditional proof with this. So we'll start out, of course, with our first premise. So premise 1. Either the witness is not telling the truth, so we'll say not W, or Brown was home by 11, or H. So this is a premise. Premise 2, if Brown was home by 11, then he saw his uncle, so if H, then S, premise. 3, if he saw his uncle, then he knows who was there earlier, so if S, then K, and that's a premise. And conclusion, if the witness is telling the truth, then Brown knows who was there earlier. Okay. So we'll do a conditional proof. We have a set of premises. We're going to make an assumption. We're going to do some derivations. And then we should reach a conclusion of this conditional form. If A, then d sub n. Okay, so let's begin. We're going to assume that W, and that is an assumption. So for line 4, we'll get W, and that's just an assumption. And because it's an assumption, we're going to, so to speak, place it under quarantine, because it's just an assumption. And then for 5, let's see, we can get a not W by double negation of line 4, because then we can work on that first premise. Because we have a disjunctive syllogism, we're saying not W is not the case. So for 6, we can get H by our disjunctive syllogism with lines 1 and 5. And then we have this if H, then S. And so for line 7, we can get S by modus ponens with lines 2 and 6. And likewise, we have this if S then K. So for 8, we can get K by modus ponens lines 3 and 7. And so, based on our assumption, we made some derivations and we reached this K. So outside of quarantine, for line 9, we can say, therefore, if W is the case, then K is the case. Or in other words, thus, if the witness is telling the truth, then Brown knows who was there earlier. So I am the Amateur Logician from amateurlogician.com. Hope this video has been helpful. Conditional proofs are a powerful type of proof-making technique, and it's pretty easy to master them. It's pretty easy to understand them, but in practice sometimes it can be difficult with complicated proofs. But in any case, it is fun, and I hope this video has been helpful to you. Thank you, and be well.